My ex-husband's new wife called me a financial abuser because I refused to bankroll her kids, so I let the truth do the talking, and it burned their entire life to the ground. The packet arrived on a Thursday. Thick cream envelope, embossed logo in the corner, the kind of correspondence that means something permanent is happening. I'd been saving for 14 months. I cut my gym membership, stopped ordering takeout on Fridays, sold the rowing machine I never used anyway. I did it quietly because if it fell through, I didn't want Jake to know it had almost existed. I handed it to him at the kitchen table after dinner. He was mid-sentence about something at school. He stopped talking when he saw my face. He opened it slowly, read the first page, then the second. He looked up at me and his eyes were glassy before he'd even finished. 14 years old, and he looked exactly the way he did at 6 when we pulled into Disney World and he pressed his face against the car window. Pure, unguarded joy. He said, "Mom, this is real." It was real. 8 weeks at the Premier Aviation Academy in Pensacola. Ground school, simulator hours, a solo flight introduction that only a handful of 14-year-olds in the country get each year. $2,450 paid in full, non-refundable. His enrollment packet. His name on the roster. He cried. Quickly, the way teenage boys cry. 2 seconds of breaking open, then a hard pivot to composure. He picked up his phone and photographed every page of the brochure. Posted it to Instagram with a single caption. "It's happening." A small red plane emoji at the end. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat with the feeling for exactly 1 evening. I knew what was coming. I'd been co-parenting with Ryan for 4 years by then, and I understood the rhythm. Good things did not happen to Jake and Lily without Ryan finding a way to make them about him. I just didn't expect the next morning to arrive quite that fast. My phone lit up at 7:14 a.m. Not a text, a phone call. Ryan's name on the screen. I answered because I always answered. It was the one rule I held to absolutely. Never give him the excuse that I was unavailable to the father of my children. He did not say good morning. He did not say congratulations. He said, "Dana's son saw Jake's post last night and now we have a situation." I set my coffee down. He explained it the way he explained everything, flatly, as though the emotional debris he was describing had been produced by weather, by fate, by anything other than choices. His stepson, Dana's 12-year-old Caleb, had seen Jake's Instagram post and had, according to Ryan, completely fallen apart. There were tears. There was a declaration that it wasn't fair. There was apparently an extended conversation in the kitchen that lasted until midnight about why Jake got to do things Caleb didn't. I listened to all of it. Then Ryan got to the point. If I had $2,450 to, in his exact phrasing, throw away on camp, then I clearly had resources I was withholding from the broader family. He needed $1,200, wired by Friday. Caleb's math tutor was running 4 sessions behind on payment, and the tutor had threatened to drop him. This was, Ryan said, a matter of basic fairness to every child in the blended family unit. I did not raise my voice. I did not explain myself at length. I said one sentence. "I don't fund the lives of children I didn't give birth to." I hung up. 10 minutes later, an email arrived from Dana. I'll give her this. She was thorough. 3 paragraphs. Precise formatting. The subject line read, "Regarding your financial abuse of this family." She outlined her position with the confidence of someone who had clearly rehearsed it, that by choosing to invest exclusively in my biological children while refusing to contribute to Caleb's educational needs, I was creating a documented environment of inequality that constituted a form of financial abuse. She used the phrase, "a real mother," twice. She said a real mother would understand that blended families required equal emotional and financial investment from all parties. She said my behavior was deliberately designed to make Jake feel superior to Caleb and by extension to destabilize her marriage. I built an email filter before I'd finished my second cup of coffee. Her name, straight to trash, automated, clean. I didn't respond. I never responded to Dana directly. I made that decision in the first month after Ryan introduced her, when I watched her refer to my daughter as Ryan's first family daughter at a school pickup. I recognized the architecture then. Some people build their identity around conflict. Responding only gives them material. Here's the part where I have to go back. Ryan and I were married for 9 years. We met in our mid-20s in Charlotte at a conference neither of us wanted to be at. He was in commercial real estate. I was a project manager at a mid-sized logistics firm. We dated for 2 years, got married in October of 2013 at a vineyard outside Asheville. Jake was born in 2011. We'd been together 4 years by then. Lily came 2 years later. For the first half of our marriage, Ryan was a reasonably good husband and a genuinely engaged father. The rot set in gradually. I've thought about it enough to know it wasn't any single event. It was more like a slow withdrawal from shared dinners, from bedtime routines, from the little unprompted gestures that tell you someone is still choosing you. By the time Jake was in 2nd grade, Ryan was traveling for work 4 days a week and treating home like a hotel he had sentimental feelings about. Dana entered the picture before he left it. I didn't know at the time. I found out the way people always find out. Not from a confession, but from a pattern. A charge on a card for a restaurant he said he hadn't been to. A text I glimpsed when his phone buzzed face up on the nightstand. I didn't make a scene. I hired an attorney. I filed. Dana had 2 kids from her first marriage. Caleb, who was 8 at the time of our divorce, and a daughter named Sophie, who was 5. Ryan moved in with them 3 months after our papers were signed. He and Dana married 11 months after that, in a ceremony I knew about only because Jake came home with a boutonniere still pinned to his jacket. Our custody agreement was clear. Ryan had the kids every other weekend and every Wednesday evening. Holidays alternated by calendar year. He had no legal financial connection to my household. I had no legal financial connection to his. We paid child support on a schedule determined by the court. It was clean, documented. I preferred it that way. The first sign that clean and documented wasn't going to protect me came about 8 months into Ryan's marriage to Dana. Lily was in 4th grade. She had a science fair project, a model of a working water filtration system, something she'd been quietly obsessed with after watching a documentary about drought. She needed specific materials: activated charcoal, filter paper, a collection of small clear tubes. I ordered everything online. She and I built it over 2 weekends at our kitchen table, and it was genuinely impressive. She could explain the chemistry of it better than most adults. Ryan was supposed to pick the kids up that Thursday for his Wednesday overnight, delayed by 1 day because of a work trip. He arrived, looked at the project, and said, in front of both kids, that it looked expensive and that I was spoiling them into thinking money grew on trees. Lily was 9. She looked at the filtration system she had built with her own hands, and she said quietly, "Grandpa helped pay for some of the tubes." Ryan said nothing else. He loaded the kids in the car. I stood in the kitchen after the door closed. That was the moment I understood what was being constructed. Not by Ryan alone. Ryan had never been creative enough to build a narrative on his own, but Ryan plus Dana was a different machine. And the narrative they were building was one where my ordinary parenting looked like weaponized advantage. That understanding didn't make the next 4 years easier, but it meant I was never surprised. By the time Jake was 13, Ryan's attendance at the kids' events had become unreliable in a documented, measurable way. I kept a record, not out of paranoia, but because I had learned to. A spreadsheet, date, event, whether Ryan attended, whether he called. I had it reviewed by my attorney 3 times over 2 years. The pattern was consistent. Ryan was present at roughly 18% of his scheduled visitation events. The rest were rescheduled, missed, or acknowledged after the fact with a text. The one I come back to most often is Lily's debate tournament. She was 12. She had been competing in junior policy debate for 2 years, and this was the regional championship. She had prepared for 6 weeks. Index cards spread across the dining table every night. She practiced her rebuttal arguments on Jake, who was a willing if impatient opponent. She was good, she knew she was good, and she was trying hard not to need anyone to confirm it. Ryan had promised he would be there. Not casually. He had made a point of it. 3 months of advance notice. He repeated it twice at drop-off. He texted Lily the week before to confirm. She told her coach her dad would be in the audience. She mentioned it to her friend group. She built it into the architecture of the day. He was not there when she walked to the podium. He was not there when she won first place. He was not there when the organizers called the finalists' families to the front of the room. My father had flown in from Knoxville 2 days earlier. He was 71, arthritic knees, had taken a 6 a.m. flight on a Thursday because his granddaughter was competing. When they called the families forward, he stepped up beside Lily without a word and put his arm around her and smiled for the photograph like it was the most natural thing in the world, because for him, it was. Ryan walked through the gymnasium doors 58 minutes after the ceremony ended. Baseball jacket, red-faced, breathing hard. He said there had been an accident on the highway. 3 lanes shut down. He'd tried to call, but the service was bad. Lily looked at him. She did not say a word for a long moment. Then she said, "Grandpa's the one who actually shows up anyway." She said it without cruelty. That was the worst part. She said it like a fact she had simply stopped working around. Ryan's face went white. He looked at my father, who looked back at him without expression. There was nothing to say. What I didn't know until much later was that Ryan had been at a middle school baseball game that afternoon. Not Jake's game. Caleb's game. His stepson's recreational league game, played at a park 12 minutes from the venue where his biological daughter was competing in a regional championship she would win. He had made a choice. He simply hadn't wanted to say so. The custody battle that followed was not Ryan's idea. I believe that. Dana was the architect. Dana had a problem. Her ex-husband, a man named Greg, had been quietly building a case for months. Greg had primary custody of Caleb and Sophie, and based on what I eventually learned, he had legitimate concerns. Dana had a temper. There were incidents. An argument at a school pickup that 3 other parents witnessed. A phone call with Sophie that her teacher had flagged. Greg was methodical and patient, and by the spring of that year, he had filed an emergency custody motion, citing emotional neglect and instability in Dana's household. Ryan panicked. His attorney apparently told him that the most effective thing he could do was demonstrate stability and involvement as a co-parent. Sworn affidavits from Jake and Lily, attesting to Ryan's presence and engagement as a father, would carry significant weight. They were, after all, the children in his existing co-parenting arrangement. They could speak to his character. He showed up at my house on a Tuesday night without calling. I heard the car in the driveway at 8:47 p.m. I know the time because I looked at the clock when I heard it, already understanding that unannounced arrivals at that hour were not neutral events. He sat down at the kitchen table. Jake was doing homework. Lily was watching something in her room. Ryan produced 2 documents from a manila folder and slid them across the table. Pre-formatted legal affidavits. Blank spaces where the children's names and statements were meant to go. Jake came to the table, looked at the papers, looked at the pen Ryan had set down beside them, looked at his father. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. How am I supposed to write about weekends that didn't happen? Ryan's voice changed. It went careful and soft in the way voices go when someone is trying to manage you. He said that this was about family unity. He said that omitting certain details details wasn't the same as lying. He said that Lily's debate tournament had been a miscommunication, not a pattern, and that Jake's recent attitude toward the family, and here he paused in a way that made clear he meant the flight academy, the Instagram post, the attention, was making things harder for everyone. I had been standing at the kitchen island with a cold mug of coffee. I set it down. 30 seconds, I said, before I call the police for trespassing. He looked at me. He looked at Jake. He picked up the papers and the pen, and he walked out. 3 days later, a formal legal notice arrived at my office. Ryan was requesting mandatory mediation with the stated goal of modifying the custody arrangement to 50-50. His stated justification was his desire to be more present in his children's daily lives. His actual justification, which became apparent within approximately 40 seconds of the mediation beginning, was that having the kids in his home half the time would make him appear more stable and capable as a co-parent in Dana's custody dispute. My children, who he had been present for at 18% of scheduled visits, were now required as set dressing. The mediation was held at a neutral office in downtown Charlotte on a Wednesday morning in March. My attorney, Patricia, sat beside me. Ryan brought his attorney. He also brought Dana. There is no rule against bringing your spouse to mediation. There is also no universe in which bringing the person at the center of the conflict is a neutral act. Dana walked in and sat directly to Ryan's left like she was the co-plaintiff, which in every functional sense she was. She did not wait for the mediator to open the session. Before introductions had finished, she turned to me and said that my refusal to contribute to Caleb's tutoring had created a documented environment of inequality in the household that was actively making their situation look unstable in the eyes of the court. She said it with the calm of someone who had practiced the sentence. She said my behavior was a calculated attempt to undermine her family and ruin her marriage. Patricia did not look up from her tablet. My client, she said, is under no legal or moral obligation to subsidize the children of a woman who helped dismantle her marriage. Ryan looked at his hands. The mediator asked Ryan to articulate why he was seeking a modification when court records showed he had met fewer than 20% of his existing scheduled visitation commitments. Ryan said he had been going through a difficult transition period. He said he was prioritizing his legacy. He actually used that word, legacy. I looked at him across the table. Your legacy, I said. You missed your daughter's regional championship to watch your stepson's recreational baseball game. You didn't call her. You didn't text. She found out from her coach's photo on Facebook. The room was quiet. Dana leaned forward. Her voice went precise and cold. She said that if I refused to agree to 50-50, if I refused to allow the children to provide affidavits, she would make sure every parent in our school district knew I was a financial bully who weaponized child support and deliberately impoverished the children of women Ryan chose over me. She had the post already drafted. She was prepared to send it. I looked at Ryan. He was looking at a coffee ring on the cover of his legal notebook. He did not look up. Patricia stood. Mediation is concluded, she said. We will see you in front of a judge. If either of you contacts Jake or Lily again about affidavits, we will be filing a motion for a restraining order. We left. That night, Dana posted her essay. It was long. My first name appeared in the opening paragraph. There was a cropped photograph of Jake's enrollment brochure, taken, I realized, from his Instagram post. The essay described, in measured and sympathetic language, a divorced mother who used financial control to dominate her ex-husband's household, who deliberately excluded the stepchildren from opportunities in order to create jealousy and instability, who had turned her own biological children against their father through strategic gift-giving and calculated emotional manipulation. It was vivid. It was persuasive. It was almost entirely fabricated. The responses came fast. Women I had never met, mothers from the school, neighbors. 2 people I had considered acquaintances sent me screenshots with their own commentary attached. By 10 o'clock, there were 47 comments under the post. The word narcissist appeared in several of them. Someone suggested I be reported to Child Protective Services. At 9:04 p.m., my doorbell rang. I looked at the camera. A man I didn't immediately recognize. Late 30s, dark jacket. He was holding a manila envelope against his chest with both hands. His face was tight. He looked like someone who had made a decision and was now living in the 60 seconds before he could take it back. I opened the door. It was Greg, Dana's ex-husband, the man who had filed the emergency custody motion, the man whose children were living half the time in Ryan's house with Dana. He said he was sorry to come at night. He said he had been driving around the block for 40 minutes trying to decide. He said I needed to see what was in the envelope. He handed it to me and took a step back. I stood in the doorway and opened it. Bank transfer printouts, 12 of them, dated across a 6-month window beginning the previous October. 3 accounts I recognized immediately. The custodial investment accounts that Ryan's parents, Dennis and Carol, had established for Jake and Lily when they were born. College accounts, set up with intention and care by grandparents who had planned meticulously for their grandchildren's futures. The accounts had been depleted, not drained in a single transaction. That would have triggered immediate flags. Done in careful increments. Transfers of $400 here, $800 there. The receiving account appeared twice across the documents, and by the 3rd page, I could see what it was. Dana's personal account. Amounts that corresponded, I would later confirm, to her legal retainer payments and to registration fees for 3 of Caleb's travel baseball tournaments, including one in Orlando in November. Ryan had been stealing from Jake and Lily's college funds to pay for his wife's custody battle and her son's baseball schedule for 6 months. The financial abuse abuse Dana had announced to 47 strangers on the internet was a confession she hadn't meant to make out loud. Every accusation she leveled at me was a blueprint of what she was already doing. She screamed about inequality to cover the fact that she was creating it. She called me a financial bully while her husband moved money out of my children's futures to buy her comfort. I sat down on the entryway floor. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the cold to come in through the open door. Greg was still on the porch. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't known about the college accounts specifically until his own attorney found the transfers while building the neglect case. He said he thought I should have this before it went to court. I thanked him. He nodded and left. I looked up. Jake was at the top of the stairs. He had heard the door. He had heard Greg's voice. He was looking at me on the floor with the papers around me, and his face was very still. He read the situation the way 14-year-olds sometimes do, faster than you want them to, with more accuracy than is fair. He walked back to his room and shut the door quietly. Not angry, not dramatic, just done. The next morning, I was at the bank at 8:50 a.m., 10 minutes before they opened. I had the transfer documents, the account numbers, Jake and Lily's birth certificates, and Patricia's direct line on speed dial. The branch manager walked me through every account connected to Ryan's access. His name had been on the custodial accounts as co-trustee. Standard procedure, established when we were still married, never updated because I had assumed in-laws' goodwill was adequate protection. I was in the middle of a document review in the lobby when my phone rang. The area code was 850, Pensacola, a woman from the Premier Aviation Academy's enrollment office. She was calling to confirm, and she paused here, in a way that told me something was very wrong, to confirm that I had, in fact, requested a full withdrawal and refund of Jake's enrollment fee. A call had been placed to their office the previous afternoon, a woman identifying herself as me. She had cited a family emergency. She had provided Jake's full name, his date of birth, his enrollment confirmation number, and a mailing address for the refund check. The mailing address was Ryan's house, $2,450. The 14 months of a canceled gym membership, of Fridays without takeout, of a rowing machine sold to a stranger on Facebook Marketplace, the 8 weeks in Pensacola, the simulator hours, the solo flight introduction, his name on the roster, gone. Overnighted to Ryan's address in a check that, if I hadn't intervened within the hour, would have been cashed before Jake got home from school. They had stolen my son's identity to steal his dream. I told the woman to stop the check immediately. I told her I was the account holder and no such call had come from me. I gave her my cell number, my attorney's number, and asked her to preserve every record of the fraudulent call, including any phone number it had originated from. She was shaken. She said she'd never had anything like this happen before. I hung up and called Patricia. What followed was not fast, but it was thorough. Patricia filed 4 motions in 7 days. Fraud, identity theft, misappropriation of custodial funds, modification of the custody arrangement based on demonstrated parental instability. Greg's attorney coordinated with Patricia's office and shared the full documentation package they had built for the neglect case. The picture that emerged across both files was consistent and damning, not a household in temporary difficulty, but a pattern of deliberate financial predation extending back more than a year. Ryan's parents, Dennis and Carol, were contacted by Patricia's office. I want to be precise about this. They were not adversaries. They were 74 and 71 years old. They had set up those accounts because they loved Jake and Lily, and they had trusted their son. When Dennis came to my door 4 days after the filing, alone, without Ryan, hat in hand, he looked like a man who had aged a decade in a week. He sat at my kitchen table and said he was sorry. He said he had not known. He said he would cooperate with everything. He cried once, briefly, when I told him about the flight academy, about the check overnighted to Ryan's address. He put his hand over his mouth and looked at the table. I made him tea. We sat there for a while. Something real had been lost. Not just money, not just a summer program, but the version of Ryan that Dennis had spent 70 years believing in. I understood that grief because I had carried my own version of it for 4 years. The custody case settled without going to trial. Ryan's attorney advised him correctly that his position was untenable. He surrendered his co-trustee status on both custodial accounts. He agreed to a repayment schedule for the full amount removed, $19,800 across the 6-month window. He retained no pathway to 50-50 custody. His access reverted to supervised visitation pending a review, a condition his own attorney couldn't argue against given the documentation. Dana's custody battle did not go well. Greg's case was thorough, and Patricia's filings had added new dimensions to the financial picture. The judge modified Dana's custody to supervised visitation as well, pending evaluation. Sophie and Caleb moved in with Greg full-time in June. Ryan and Dana were still living together as of the last information I had. I don't know what that looks like from the inside. I know their household lost the children it was built around. I know the legal fees consumed whatever reserves they'd had. I know Ryan's parents have minimal contact with him now. What that costs him privately, whether he sits with it, whether he understands it, I genuinely can't tell you. I stopped being able to predict what Ryan felt a long time ago. Jake went to Pensacola in July. The academy reinstated his enrollment after full documentation was provided confirming the fraudulent cancellation. They waived the administrative reprocessing fee. Jake didn't know about the cancellation until 2 weeks before he left. I made that choice deliberately. I didn't want the theft to become part of the story he carried into those 8 weeks. I wanted him to arrive at that airfield as himself, not as a kid whose father had tried to steal this from him. He called me on the 3rd night from a borrowed phone. There was wind in the background. background. He said he'd had his first simulator session. He said the instructor had told him he had natural instinct for spatial orientation. He laughed. He hadn't laughed like that with me in months. Lily is 13 now. She's still competing in debate. She won regionals again this past spring. My father flew in from Knoxville again. We took her to dinner after, the three of us, at a steakhouse downtown. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu and didn't apologize for it, which I found unreasonably moving. She hasn't asked about Ryan much. She knows what she knows. Kids absorb more than we ever intend them to, and they build their understanding quietly, in private, without giving you the opportunity to shape it. The shape she's built is accurate. I think that matters more than anything I could have told her. Here is what I know now that I didn't know when I was in the middle of it. Dana calling me a financial abuser was not an accusation. It was a disclosure. People name the crimes they are committing. They do it because the word in the air neutralizes it somehow. If they've already said it about you, it can't be said about them. It's a magician's trick. Misdirection. Look at her hands so you don't see mine. I spent months trying to defend against a label that had nothing to do with my behavior. I was careful and documented and measured, and none of that changed the fact that 47 strangers on the internet had absorbed a false portrait of who I was. That hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. The hurt was specific and personal, and it took longer to process than the legal victories did. But the truth has its own momentum. You can't accelerate it. You can only document and wait and refuse to become the thing they've accused you of being. Jake sent me a postcard from Pensacola, handwritten, which he never does. A picture of the Gulf at sunset, orange and flat and enormous. On the back, he wrote 4 words and signed his name. The sky is real. I have it on my refrigerator. I look at it most mornings. I don't need to explain what it means. Some things hold themselves up.